Hello, everybody. So today I want to kind of open the wound on something that I think that I will get a lot of disagreement within certain parts of the Duluth community, but I think is a discussion that needs to open up pretty desperately, in my opinion, especially considering, the nature of the politics that's going on in the United States right now, right? And that is me complaining about all of these people going around claiming that they're politically emancipating you, right? Now, I'm just going to be blunt with you guys. I really didn't give a fuck for the longest time about what other popular Duluth creators were doing or saying. And the reason why was because I was more focused on my own projects, right? And, I will admit, for a long time, I wasn't even able to get anything politically done, right? Because I was living in an abusive relationship. I was afraid to go out. I was paranoid. It was just, when you're in that kind of situation, it's very hard to do anything about it, right? But I didn't lie to people and tell them that, my work is politically emancipating or whatever. I feel like political emancipation is something that has to come from, the person reading it. You can't just tell them this is politically emancipating, right? And, it's just frustrating because, the more I find out about what these people are up to, the more I find out, I really just believe that their politics is completely passive. Let's talk about Brooks for a second. The reason why I criticize Brooks is because he's pulling away a sizable amount of activity away from potentially local organizing or focusing on tangible issues that can be done and putting it towards these dancing frog costumes, which for all we know, all that money could be going to the supplier of the costumes who is friends with somebody involved in the organizing of Operation Inflation, right? And so for that reason, there's no value there. These people get in these costumes and they get really close to these camps, but they do nothing. They do jack shit. All they do is get arrested. What are you materially doing, right? I understand that Brooks likes to repeat symbols over and over again, but what are you actually materially doing with that, right? The reason why repeating symbols works for reactionaries and fascists is because the currents of, the direction that all the semiosis and shit is going is actually coordinated with the repetition of those signs. But when it's something like dancing frogs, when you put that into the flow of how things are moving right now, it just is embarrassing. It just makes you look like morons, especially considering that you've accomplished politically nothing, right? You've basically gotten people arrested. That's about it. So that's just an example, though, of just how skewed this belief is. And I really think it's important to complain about this because people are going to watch this and think, wow, that's so deep. They're going to react to it the same way they're reacting to No Kings right now. And they're going to be like, wow, that's so deep. And then they're not going to do anything. And then they're not going to do anything. Trump is going to go around and kill more people in ICE. They're going to fucking just try to nuke Iran. They're going to try to fucking kill every Palestinian in the world. You're doing nothing when you do that, right? You have to think consciously, what are my actions doing? And this is why, for example, even though it might not be as cool or something that might get attention, which, by the way, if you're getting attention online for your political activity, that's already a dead giveaway that your activity is not valuable, right? You're just, it's just marketing at that point, right? It has to be something that's on the ground. It has to be something that, is not necessarily something that's going to get you 1 million views or get you on CNN, but something that's valuable to the local people, right? And, again, like I said, I'm not necessarily the most active in this particular regard because I'm dealing with a lot of my own health issues and a lot of my own trauma, but, I think it's fair to criticize other people who make the claim that they're politically emancipating people to, act like that. And to be clear, just because I say that I haven't been super active doesn't mean that I haven't been doing things. I've been doing things like food donations when I can and, trying to help and support people on a local level and stuff. But my activity has been, not particularly active, admittedly, right? And that's just because, again, my life is crazy right now. And, again, I don't lie to people about that political activity. But, again, I'm allowed to criticize, right? Now, enough talking about Brooks. I want to talk about a really good example of this passiveness with Craig. But first, I'd like to respond to a criticism that I receive a lot about my own Discord server. Right now, there is a controversy about my Discord server in DGQC that I had no idea about, because these people are cowards and they don't tell you. They just talk about you behind your back because they are afraid of you. But they're pissed off basically at our Discord server because we're supposedly tankies, right? Now, I have to tell people who use this term unironically, you don't know what a tanky is. Nobody knows what a tanky is. It's like a magical unicorn. It doesn't exist. Nobody knows what the fuck it is. It's just an insult that you got borrowed from the CIA that you throw at people that you don't like when they tell you to read Marx. Like, that's pretty much what it is, right? And, like, this is a really stupid complaint, right? But I would like to address it, because I think the big difference between my community and like most other Deliz communities on Discord is that we invite actively the participation of people who are from an internationalist kind of perspective on politics, right? Like, we have people from all over the place in our Discord server, and as a result, we have a larger representation of non-white and non-Americans in our server than I would argue most other Discord servers, right? And a consequence of that is you're going to have a higher amount of people who are on the left, who are more traditional with their Marxism. We would be talking like your Marxist-Leninists or your Maoists or whatever, right? So we have people like that coming in, right? And we invite their discussions because they have interesting things to say. Do you really think that Guattari, for example, was going around and just telling every Maoist, nah, I'm not gonna listen? No, Guattari was the guy who listened to anyone, right? He's better at listening to people than I am, right? And as a result, he got a ton of ideas from a bunch of people. That doesn't mean he wasn't critical of certain things, but it does mean that, he listened to people of all varieties. And not only this, but we allow these people to pressure others for spreading propaganda. Like, yes, we are critical of people who go around and just act like China is the worst thing on the planet, or people who are not critical about the war in Ukraine, right? And that's not even because I personally support those countries. Some of the people in my Discord server support China, right? But to me, I'm kind of have more of an ambivalent view on China. My opinion on China is basically like, I have always been kind of like a micro-political person. It's hard for me to even imagine how things should be organized on the macro-political level, because there's just so many gaps, and unlike a lot of people, I don't feel comfortable saying to somebody, oh, you should do this, and not acknowledging those gaps, right? So for me, I usually focus on the micro scale, right? So to me, China and the United States, the West, and Russia, these superpowers represent these larger structures that I don't personally have a lot of control over, right? And so, to me, it's like checking the weather. And when I check the weather, the U.S.'s weather doesn't look very good right now. The entire West is pretty concerning right now, especially for their support of Israel. I don't think Russia is really going to contribute anything major in terms of, anything. So, what else do you have left? You have China, and China seems to be, in at least several ways, more competent than the other superpowers to handle the challenges of the 21st century. Now, some people seem to interpret this as me loving the fucking Chinese Communist Party, which, I'm Guattarian, no. Okay, I'm against, representative politics for the very reason that representation does not capture, all the details, right? Guattari proposes a kind of interesting, attempt to explain what his idea is. He says, I am in favor of a market economy, but not one geared only on profit and its valorization of status, hierarchy, and power. I am in favor of an institutional market economy, one founded on another mode of valorization. Instead of being more capitalistic, we want to make an anti-capitalism within capitalism, right? So what he means by this is that he believes that you can't just organize an economy centralized around everything. You do kind of need a market, but he doesn't want a market that is focused on the values of accumulation and power and things like that. He wants a market that focuses on other values, right? And this kind of goes along with his, views of, deterritorialization in, politics, right? Basically, he sees, I think the best way to model what he sees, right, is he sees, and the way I interpret it at least, is that, yes, China has a very state-structured thing, centralized structure, and there's more details to it than that, obviously. I know that there's provinces and stuff, but long story short, there are centralized structures throughout China, right? I don't believe that those structures are ideal for organization, and there's plenty of problems with those structures, and they need to be broken down more and more, right, to be able to, deal with them, right? But the problem itself is not the construction of institutions. The problem is essentially the centralization and hierarchicalization of these institutions, right? That's really what Guattari's point is. And that is very distinct, I think, from this sort of anarchist current that's taken over Deleuze's, interpretation of politics. I don't know enough about Deleuze to say anything about that particular thing, but yes. So I wanna criticize Craig here for his response to the repeater books situation, right? Now, to be clear, obviously, I completely agree with what the signatories were made for initially, right? Which was, the protest of the CEO or whatever suppressing the views against Israel, right? Obviously, I support that, and I obviously support, why people would, have all of these signatures, right? So this kind of goes over. Alright, sorry for skipping so much. I had to skip a bunch because the first part of this article is mostly just explaining what's going on in, the situation, kind of, giving, a groundwork. Essentially, what's going on is Craig is describing the situation where there is a sort of conflict of interest within Repeater/Zero Books, where this one guy named Daniel Tutt, who has controversial opinions, is kind of dominating in a sort of suspicious way that might implicate him towards having special, treatment with the publisher, right? And this involves having more content oriented towards his book rather than other works, and there's this hint that there is an ideological divide between these characters, where there's a more traditional Marxist interpretation and then this sort of anarchisty Deleuzian interpretation. And I want to stress, the anarchist interpretation of Deleuze is not canon, and I actually disagree that Deleuze and Guattari are anarchist philosophy. I believe that, they are actually more in a Marxist current. They are just a very unusual kind of Marxist, but they are not anarchist, right? And so that's just my personal opinion, though. So we have Tutt suggests in various places that Repeater Books' ideological trajectory was a fatal misstep, arguing that its embrace of certain theoretical trends has attended to the imprint's downfall. In this blog, Tutt writes that Repeater Books is emblematic of problematic position in contemporary left-wing politics. The imprint's alleged contradictions underscore a key tension on the left between class-first Marxism and Deleuzian left liberalism that must be actively confronted and tested through open intellectual engagement rather than censorial control. But this thesis and many other claims attached to it don't hold up to a broader scrutiny. For example, the notion that Repeater Books as an entity has functioned as an avatar of censorial Deleuzian left liberalism, a recurring specter in Tut's personal pantheon of ideological foes, one set against a more class-oriented Marxism, is patently absurd. Indeed, such claim is not only misleading, but also likely an effort to the mainly predominantly Marxist authors whom so basically he's pissed off that they're favoring these so-called traditional Marxist authors over Deleuzians. Now, I'm going to tell you something, Craig, if you ever watch this video. The most politically fruitful activity that I've had as a guattarian is actually interacting with Maoists and Marxist-Leninists. And the reason why is because, one, these people are actually becoming more and more interested in Guattari's ideas because they realize that he's not a anarchist liberal going around and telling people to just, oh, we gotta break down a line so that we can be free. Like, they realize that he actually does have a political theory and is involved, minority politics, and as a result, a lot of minority, especially like black or, third world country kind of stuff, are interested in this intersection of Guattari and, Mao or Marx or Lenin or even Stalin, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if you'd be too happy about that one. But, just this kind of like interaction with more what you would consider like a class-based or a party-based kind of politics. And they're interested in that because they're interested in the critique of those kinds of politics, because they want to take that critique and they want to integrate it into their own theory. Yes, they interpret it as a dialectical development, which is something that we know we all disagree with, but, that's the reason why they're there, and that's part of the reason why I'm friendly to these people, because they want those answers. Instead of perpetuating this sort of delusion that, these ideas are ideologically at odds with each other, and they have to fight with each other, and one is suppressing the other and establishing and reinforcing these territories, I actively try to deterritorialize those differences. And I think it's very interesting that Craig is not doing that, but rather reinforcing those boundaries. He is continuing to feed into the ritournelles that construct this territory. He is not creating anything new. And this is part of the reason why Deleuzian politics has been in a standstill for decades now, because they are not creating anything new. They're too afraid to interact with other people. Now, this is not to say that this is not to criticize Craig for his complaints at Zero Books. I think that, this guy taking over Zero Books and, basically, I can believe that, he would try to suppress this stuff. And you got to remember, a lot of the traditional Marxists are operating on propaganda that came from Noam Chomsky and Jean Brickman, which is something I've been researching and I don't see anyone else talking about for some reason. Like, I don't understand why the Sokal affair isn't important to any of you people, despite the fact that it's literally the reason why any of this shit is happening. But, like, a lot of those misconceptions are caused by propaganda. You could, I don't know, try to undo that propaganda, right? Like, the reason why this guy is even motivated to do this is because of propaganda. Has nothing to do with you, but you have to be the one who has to address it. What do you think I've been doing for the last 5 years? I've been undoing those propaganda worms with hard fucking historical facts, right? Christ, do you know how much I've had to deal with people telling me that Félix Guattari is a pedophile? Yeah, that's the kind of shit I've been correcting for 5 years behind your backs, right? While you're going around and fighting stupid fights with this guy, right? And again, to stress, I don't think that what Tut was doing was right, and I think that Tut was essentially pissing all over fucking Mark Fisher's legacy. But to be clear, right, the way that Craig is responding is weak. It's pathetic. It's doing nothing to solve this problem, right? He's just bitching about how these territories are so real and we can just right? So, let's continue. A more accurate picture of Repeater's orientation during my tenure could be found in the conceptual framework shared by many of its authors and presenters. Class struggle and class war were not marginal themes, but blah, blah. So, like, jeez, he's basically complaining that, like, oh, well, we talk about class, we talk about, class war and class struggle and all this, they're deep and stuff. And, like, again, I'm not here to criticize the actual theoretical content of, Craig's work, but I will say that I am personally skeptical. And the reason why I'm personally skeptical is because all of the interactions that I've had from people coming from both DGQC and Acid Horizon seem to have a very poor understanding of class politics. And I think that this is part of the reason why they are so scared to interact with traditional, more traditional Marxists, right? Because even if I personally disagree with more traditional Marxists, I still value their commentary on class politics. And I may even believe that their commentary on class politics may be even more valuable than mine. Right? And I think it's important to listen to these people. And again, Tut is not justified in his behavior, but he's acting this way because of a problem that none of these people want to address, that I've been dealing with for the last, 5 fucking years in my little enclave. Right? So, one only needs to look at our book Anti-Oculus, which demonstrates how class issues are intricately woven into the fabric of surveillance institutions and biopolitical apparatuses, but that's not what is being said, right? When a Marxist criticizes you for not centering your analysis around class, right, they're not saying, oh, well, you don't talk about class, right? They're saying that classism should be the central subject. And the way that I deal with this as a Guattarian is that I just see class as kind of like a very abstract kind of concept, right? And I think to myself, well, how do various minoritarian and technological and blah 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 movements interact with class, right? Class doesn't have to be necessarily the centralizing figure, but this is the figure that Marxists are curious about. This is what the discourse currently wants to ask, right? So I think it's fair to answer it specifically within the context of class, rather than just, oh, it impacts classes in a certain way. Surveillance has this impact. And again, I have not read Anti-Oculus, alright, so maybe I'm wrong about this, right? And I'm perfectly fine with being corrected in the comments about this interpretation, but I just don't see, that's the reason why they're saying you're not talking about class, because class is kind of more like a side mention thing as opposed to, the primary part of the discussion. Marxists believe that class is important over all this other shit is because they believe that all that other shit produces identities that alienate people, right? The thing is that you should be answering why that is not necessarily the case. Why is it that, minoritarian politics does not destroy solidarity? And I think that, Guattari has the toolkit to make that argument based on his, interesting synthesis of molecular politics with, the minority, So, anyways, let's continue. One way to perhaps quantify any perceived ideological disparity is to examine the content published. So basically, he's bitching about that. He's like, look at this. This is so stupid. Among the videos posted from 2021 onward, 17 featured the word Marxism in the title. Well, wait for it. Shut the fuck up, Craig. Not even one contained the word Deleuze or Deleuzian. Not one fucking video on a channel with more than 90,000 subscribers. The last time Deleuze's name appeared in a title was during Doug Lane's tenure. Okay, obviously he doesn't like Deleuze. So, are you going to just continue to contribute to the fight by just reinforcing the boundary between the two? Are you going to continue encouraging a culture that says, oh, we can't talk to these traditional Marxists, they're our enemy, they're trying to suppress us, right? It's so frustrating because it's the evidence that's presented so far is very weak. The evidence that is presented that anything an actual discourse that's being a useful discourse is actually being produced is very weak. This is just the same stupid fucking Twitter psyoped bullshit of, oh, the anarchists can't get along with the traditional Marxists because they're talking over each other. I hate this shit. All right. Anyways, This trend extends to Tut's own contributions. One of the videos on Marxism in the post-merger era was Tut's own work. In fact, he was given latitude to create the entire series titled The Lacanian Left, in which Tut interviewed fellow Lacanians on the intersection of psychoanalysis and Marxism. Notably, Tut was also the very first solicited contributor to the channel after the 2021 takeover, debuting with a first interview featuring Jewel Taylor on Domenico Lacerdo's work on Nietzsche. Far from being exclusionary ideological space, Repeater has actively paid contributors like Tut to produce exclusive videos aiming to foster a broad tent of left-wing perspectives. Again, like, Tut isn't right to do this because it is like a shared, community. Repeater Books is supposed to be a shared community resource, but again, like, basically it just sounds like Craig is getting mad largely because of the ideological material. Like, I completely agree with him getting mad over the takeover, but it seems like he's very fixated specifically on the ideological material here. And again, like, I don't have a problem with those interviews appearing. I have more of a problem with the fact that they are suppressing other content. I think that, you're a publisher, you should allow the people who are publishing under your name to have a presence on the YouTube channel. But, like, this is more than that. Let's get real, Craig. This is more than that. You don't like these guys for their beliefs. You think that they're ideologically wrong, and you're not interested in actually producing this discourse. Because let me explain to you just how passive this behavior is. Instead, you go and write on your blog. You're all like, you know what you could have done? You could have gone and made a Kickstarter for a new publisher that was scaled back, right? So not like massive, right? Because you're going to be starting small. But I guarantee you that if you contacted Jonas Sieca, right, and told him, hey, yeah, Repeater Zero Books is pissing on the grave of Mark Fisher by basically turning it into another Marxist-Leninistoid fucking publication, and they won't let us publish our shit publicly on our YouTube channel, and we were wondering if you could promote and help us support a possible alternative. Like, was this never discussed? Was this never, like you guys have, I don't know how to describe this, but Acid Horizon probably has some of the largest influence in this community. I can't get anywhere. But Acid Horizon, you probably could have gone over to Sieca and had the power and leverage to say, I want to start a Kickstarter that, actually creates a publisher that respects Mark Fisher instead of using his publisher as a sort of like walking fucking animatronic for, Marxist-Leninists. He would have been so on board with that. Except for the fact that Jonas Sieca, unlike 90% of Deleuzians online, actually does appreciate Marx and these criticisms, and he integrates them into there. So maybe that's the real reason why you didn't contact him, because he's too fucking class-oriented for you or whatever. But, like, why was this never considered? Why was it never considered to have an alternative media project? Like, I've been doing alternative media projects this entire time, and I've been fighting this current all by myself, right? I've not been able to have the benefits of these connections, partially because I was schizophrenic, partially because I can't keep up with the expected output of some of these channels. I mean, that's why they do podcasts, because then they can keep pushing crap out. But, like, I operate in a different realm, and, like, it's crazy to me that you're telling me that you couldn't think of anything. Like, I can think of stuff in my little circle. Even despite my complaints, I have made progress, okay? I managed to reach out to people like Charles Duvall and fucking, what's his name? Henning Schmidgen for interviews. I've managed to contact, figures for, verifying historical details and stuff. And it's really frustrating when I have all these projects that I'm trying to do that are focused around, like, archival and stuff like that, and have been trying to make my own movements and stuff like this, and Craig is too much of a pussy to do the same when he has 100 times more resources than I do. Right? Like, to me, like, don't get me wrong, Tut is doing the wrong thing, and I disagree with what he was doing. But this is the most pussy-ass fucking behavior I've ever seen. This is why Deleuzians are toothless, because when they're presented with a political situation, instead of being materially political, they write a post like this. If Deleuzian thought had truly held that such an impervious and pervasive influence over repeater, one would expect the imprint of Deleuzian faction to push their agenda more explicitly in the blah 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 blah. Make your own fucking publisher. Fuck. You know, this pisses me off because when this was going on, I was writing my zine builder, right? And that's literally self-publishing. If you have a library card, you can just print out zines. Like, one of the reasons why I've recounted these details is that Acid Horizon has repeatedly been the target of Tut's accusations of censorship. When it comes to Tut's own contributions to Repeater, nothing could be further to the truth, blah blah blah. As an avid researcher of Deleuze and Guattari, and at perhaps one time the closest thing to a resident Deleuzian at Repeater. Oh my... Craig, shut the fuck up. Perhaps a few words about my own former editorial privileges are in order. During my time at Zero Repeater, I served as the creative director and head of programming for the YouTube channel, a role that gave me broad discretion to feature in nearly any video. And so he's just saying, oh, I shared a wide diversity of videos, and he's not showing any diversity of videos, and it's bad. Let's see, I also... this decision is nothing to say. Okay, he's just talking about copyright crap. I have no regrets about removing the old content or rejecting proposed submissions. As Xenogothic, another one of these posers, aptly puts it, political publishing is political. Really? Like, I mean, it is... I mean, it is political technically, but, like, this, you go and say political publishing is political, and then you don't go and create your own publisher. You don't... Instead, you go and offer $175 courses on your fucking page. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they did make a publisher. But I haven't seen it. I haven't heard about it. So what's going on here? I mean, like... You go and say political publishing is political, but it's political because of material interactions. You know that, right? Like, when you publish a book that has political material in it, that is a political material action because you're distributing material for people to read, right? But think about it for a second. That material, not only can most, like, Marxist and Deleuze-Guattarian material be referenced online fairly easily without necessarily piracy. I don't know how true that is for Anti-Oedipus and A Thousand Plateaus, but a lot of Guattari stuff you can find online for free without piracy, which makes sense because he was the pirate king. But like if you just keep publishing books, like all you're doing is just giving a platform for various voices in a sort of very formalized context. I think this kind of feeds into, again, like, Craig having a very kind of, how do I put it generously, capitalistic understanding of politics. Like, bro, I don't know how to put this, but, like, yes, your books are valuable. Yes, people read them, but people are reading my zines in bookstores when I place them in there more than they're reading your books because they don't have to pay for my zines, right? I publish and distribute those for free, and some of them have over 10,000 words in them, right? So they aren't just like short readings, they are full texts of important subjects that I distribute for free. I create them myself, and in fact I distribute them on my website as well. And now that this is happening again, I think I'm going to actually go through and try to make more zines on my website available, because it's, like, crazy that this is how the average corporate Deleuzian thinks that things should run. They think that everything should be run through these fucking companies and shit. Like, they don't think consciously, like, look at this stupid shit. You say that this is what you want, but really what you want is you want this to shut up, and you want this to have the whole thing, and people see through it. That's why people are bitching, and when you say, oh, but I mentioned class politics, like, yeah, no, come on, dude. And again, like I said, Tut is wrong here. And I have to keep saying this because I've noticed that people who view these videos that come from the outside are not very good at listening, so I have to make sure I repeat myself 5 or 6 times so that they understand, right? So this is so stupid. Like, a January 2025 online dust-up began with Tut criticizing a shitpost from Acid Horizon account, but quickly spiraled into a broader clash involving the usual combatants. Like, Jesus Christ, people go and call me a drama queen for just, like, calling out Brooks and Sunday every so often, and it's nothing on this stupid shit. Xenogothic was quick to highlight this move as ironic. Like, I hate all these people. Xenogothic, you're a sued too. Shut up. Let's see. I hope readers recognize these glaring contradictions, not as just a reason to question the credibility of Tut's claims, but also call to critically examine the information he has put forward. Again, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you do something? Why don't you change the political landscape? Why do you have to simp for fucking 0 books? They're dead. Whatever. Move on. I don't get it. I don't get these people. I genuinely do not understand these people.